How's it going, everyone? It is Panjano here, and welcome to the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 Warzone Season 2 Ultimate FPS Increase Guide. In this video, we're going to be covering absolutely everything you need to know from start to finish on optimizing your game, alongside which settings you should be using for a competitive advantage to allow you to get the best FPS possible and lowest input latency. If you enjoy learning about optimization, leveling up your gameplay and maximizing efficiency, today's video sponsor Brilliant is ideal, helping you to reach your personal or professional goals with highly engaging, personalized hands-on interactive lessons on all things STEM. From basic to advanced starting knowledge, you can develop your skills and learn data analysis, computer science, programming, science and engineering, and math in a more effective and fun way. Brilliant is here to help you develop new skills in a low-pressure, visually stimulating environment where you learn by doing. Whether you have 5 days, 5 hours, or 5 minutes, you can find learning segments to fit within your schedule, no matter how free or busy you may be. With Brilliant, you can always learn, develop, and increase your skill set or knowledge, so check them out utilizing the link in the description down below for a special offer giving you 20% off for life with Brilliant Premium. Thank you to Brilliant for sponsoring this segment of the video. Before we jump into the in-game specific optimizations, we're quickly going to be going over a few basic Windows options just to ensure that we aren't running into any potential options which are causing stuttering, other performance loss, or potentially just reducing performance in all of your games, not just Warzone. Take yourself down to the Windows button and search for GPU space settings. Select the graphics settings panel. Go to the top of the screen to change default graphics settings. There'll be multiple options available to you depending on your GPU and your system. If you see the option for hardware accelerated GPU scheduling, this is one setting that I would highly recommend that you test out on your system at the end of this video by turning it on, playing a couple of games, and turning it off and playing a couple of games. Turning it off on some systems can actually reduce micro stuttering issues potentially caused by it, and some systems may see no difference. It is worthwhile noting that you will have to have hardware accelerated GPU scheduling enabled on your system if you're planning on utilizing FSR3 or DLSS3 frame generation. Next up is optimizations for windowed games. You want to have this enabled in all scenarios, as Call of Duty Warzone utilizes the DirectX 12 API, which doesn't actually support a full screen exclusive mode, meaning that even if you select full screen modes inside of Warzone, they are technically running in windowed mode anyway, so you want to have this option enabled on all systems. Last but not least, if you are planning on utilizing G-Sync or FreeSync within inside of the game, which I would highly recommend, you would need to also have the variable refresh rate option toggled with inside of here to on. Before we jump into the game, it's also worthwhile at this point to update your GPU drivers and potentially even customize and debloat your very own NVIDIA driver. This is super simple, quick, and easy to do, and if you'd like to see how to do this, there is a video linked in the description down below. Customizing your own GPU driver isn't necessary to follow along with this video, but at the very minimum, you should make sure that you are on the latest update to ensure that you have all functionality and the latest optimizations provided by your GPU manufacturer. This now leads us over to the game-specific optimizations. Before we boot into the game and go through the individual game settings, we're first of all going to be clearing out all of the old game cache which could potentially be causing stuttering. All you need to do is navigate down to either Battle.net or Steam depending on where you have Warzone installed. Right click on the game, navigate over to Properties, then go to Installed Files, go to the top and select Browse. Inside of here, go inside of the COD 23 folder. You'll then see the folder for shader cache. Highlight this folder, right click and select Delete. Go back inside of Steam or Battle.net and press play. The last thing we need to do before going into the optimized presets is to navigate to the top right hand side to the settings logo, navigate down to the graphics settings. Once inside of here, navigate down to Restart Shader Preloading. Select this option and select Restart on your game. You'll then manually have to close out of the game yourself, select Exit to Desktop, head back inside of Battle.net or Steam and select Play again. As you can see in the top left hand side, this has worked successfully because my game has just gone and preloaded all of the shaders. First of all, navigate over to Graphics. With inside of here, display mode, I would highly recommend selecting full screen exclusive, but if you need to go with borderless or extended windowed and those work better for you, you can choose any option with inside of here. Display adapter, you want to make sure that you have your GPU selected with inside of here if it's not already. Screen refresh rate, go with inside of this option and set this to the highest available option that you see on your screen. Set the highest refresh rate. Next up is your display resolution. For the most part, you want to have this set to your native resolution, which is typically going to be the highest option available with inside of here or whatever is selected under auto. Now we can and will be adjusting this slightly later on in the video, so for now just make sure that this is set to your monitor's actual resolution. Brightness is something that I would definitely recommend that you jump into and adjust whilst inside of a live match. You don't have to follow the presets which are selected on screen now, simply set this to a value in a live game, go back to the game, see how it looks. If you need it higher or lower, do dial this in for your personal preference. For those of you on NVIDIA GPUs, under the display settings, when you do see the option for NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency, you want to be making use of Reflex Low low latency turned to on. You could also go with on plus boost, but it is going to increase power draw of the GPU and increase its clock speed in more CPU limited scenarios, which may not actually have a benefit. Try out both in your system, but for the most part, I'd recommend going with on. One of the new settings which is available with inside of here, which can help to reduce power consumption whilst inside of menus or when tabbed out, is the eco mode. You don't have to use any of the eco mode settings, you can just go with custom, but in all honesty, I'd recommend going with efficiency. VSync gameplay needs to be set to off at all times. Even if you're planning on utilizing a G-Sync or FreeSync setup, there is never any excuse to actually use VSync inside of your game. VSync menu is personal preference. I also like to have this turned off. Custom frame rate, for now we're going to be setting this to unlimited, but we will be coming back to this later on after all of the optimizations are applied. Menu rendering resolution, I would set to optimal. Pause game rendering, off. Navigate down to the bottom and select apply. With that completed, head up to the quality tab at the top. First of all, going to render resolution. We're currently going to be leaving this set to 100%. Upscaling / sharpening, we're not going to be adjusting this setting just yet, as we will be changing this later on in the video as one of the last options, because there's no point in optimizing this yet. The other settings are more important at this point in the setup. VRAM scale target, I'd recommend having set to 80%. If your GPU has slightly more VRAM, let's say 8GB or more, then you could go up to 90%. But this is another one of those options that you will need to test for yourself. If you still notice micro stuttering or odd hitching issues, try lowering this ever so slightly down to 80 or potentially 70%. Variable rate shading needs to be enabled in all circumstances, as it provides a decent performance uplift, and you shouldn't notice any negative impact to your visual quality. Once set up, navigate down and select apply. Once all of those settings have been set up for your system, on screen now you can find two optimized presets in which I'd recommend that you can simply pause the video, copy all of the settings for the preset you wish to go with, whether it's the esports config or the recommended config, pause the video, copy all of the settings and apply them to your game. These two presets are fully dialed in to give you the absolute best results, whether you're looking for a decent balance of visuals and FPS performance uplift just to make your game more efficient but still looking good with the recommended preset, or for those of you looking for the highest competitive advantage, lowest input latency and maximum FPS regardless of anything with the esports config. With that completed and out of the way, we now need to jump into the in-game config files to do a few more adjustments to the graphics settings to ensure that we get the best FPS possible. Navigate down to your file explorer. On the left hand side, find Documents, Call of Duty, Players, navigate down to options.4.cod23.cst. You need to go to this exact file. Go down to the bottom to the Windows key, type in Notepad. With a blank notepad open, simply drag the file into the notepad where you'll then be able to read what the file says, and we can change a few options with inside of here. First of all, starting off with the all-important thread count for handling job queue or renderer worker count. This setting is one of the most important to get right for your system to ensure that you have the optimal performance and reduce stuttering. The easiest and most effective setting for most systems is to take the amount of cores your CPU has and take one away. To see this for yourself, all you need to do is navigate down to your taskbar, right click and open Task Manager. On the left hand side, go to Performance, click on CPU. With inside of here, you'll find cores and logical processors. Whatever the number of cores is for your CPU, you want to take one away. So for me, renderer worker count is going to be set to 5. Be scrolling down slightly. First up, limit we're going to be setting to either 0 or 1. Show going to be set to false. If this is labeled as true, simply go in, remove true and type false. Limit interval is going to be set to 1. For those of you on slightly lower end systems, weapons eject brass, false. Culling threshold, change this to a 5 and change this to a 0. Next up, Catmull Clark subdivision level, setting this anywhere from 0 to 2. I'm personally going to be going with 0. Next up is sun shadow cascade, going to be low. Make sure that you include these two brackets, right click, select copy, remove the option in the quotes, press backspace, right click, select paste. Flexion probe relighting update stages to 1. Static shadow clip map resolution, I would recommend that you go with either 1024 or for slightly lower end, go with 512. If you're going with the esports config, you'd want to set this all the way down to 0. Enable velocity based blur and setting this to false. All you then need to do is navigate to the top left hand side to File and Save. Next up, a very useful quality of life setting that I would recommend everyone adjusts is to navigate over to the audio section, scroll all the way down towards the bottom to the reduce tinnitus sound. This takes a lot of the harshness and high end out of flashbangs, which could protect your hearing and potentially make those sounds not as jarring. For the next quality of life update that I would highly recommend that you check out is to navigate over to the interface tab. Be navigating down to color customization to scroll down to the color filter settings. We're going to be setting color filter to filter 2, color filter target world, and color filter intensity and interface intensity are both going to be set to 100%. Once that's completed, go down and select apply. It's also worth potentially adjusting the HUD bounds option under the interface tab, as this will allow you to bring in elements closer to the screen instead of them being tucked away in the corners. This is especially useful for those of you on ultra wide or slightly larger monitors, leaving most things in your peripheral vision so you can stay more focused on the crosshair, potentially increasing your competitive advantage. And to ensure that you're getting all of the information possible at all times, you can expand how much of the map you can see on the radar by going over to a square radar rather than a round one. All there is left to do now is to set your proper upscaling methods. I'd highly recommend that you boot into a live instance of the game to do this, so you can see immediately how the different upscaling methods perform on your system and how they look. If you currently aren't measuring your FPS with inside of the game and you don't have any custom overlays like I do, to enable a basic FPS counter with inside of the game, press escape, head to the settings menu, interface, scroll down to telemetry, select show more, FPS counter on. In the top left hand side, you'll then be able to see a basic FPS counter so you can measure before and after. So as you can see for me, in this exact spot, I'm getting 203 frames per second. If I press escape, head to the settings menu, graphics, go to quality at the top, then scroll down to your upscaling / sharpening settings. Inside of here, I'm currently utilizing Fidelity Cast. In my opinion, this is the best looking option, but it's not the best performing. First thing that I'd recommend that everyone does to check out to see if it looks good for your system and performs well is to set FSR3. Select show more, go to the FSR3 preset and start with the quality preset. Select apply, go back into your game and see how it looks. As you can see for me, that's nearly increased my FPS by about 10%. I'm very happy with how the game looks. Do make sure that you do move the mouse around and see how it looks in the distance and see if you are happy. Go back to graphics, quality, upscale / sharpening, show more, then try out the balanced preset. The lower the preset you go, the better the performance should be, but you'll get a slight reduction to visual quality. You don't have to go with AMD's FSR 3.0, but it's definitely a very good option to consider. For those of you on NVIDIA GPUs, you could also go with NVIDIA's DLSS options by going to DLSS, show more, and selecting the exact same presets. Start with quality, select apply, see how it performs, and see how it looks. The good thing about DLSS is that you can actually adjust the sharpness with inside of here as well. I would personally recommend going between 70 and 100% sharpness. Start with the quality preset, go back inside of your game. As you can see, I'm getting about 222 FPS. Going down to the balanced preset, selecting apply, seeing how it performs and seeing how it looks. And you're able to see I'm also getting about another extra 10 FPS by doing that. So for everyone, I would first of all recommend starting off with FSR 3.0, going through the different profiles and seeing how it performs. For NVIDIA users, try out FSR 3 first. If you don't get the results you're looking for, head over to DLSS, try out the different presets. Last but not least, for those of you looking for the absolute best crisp visuals possible, you'd want to be going with Fidelity FX Cast. This won't be increasing your FPS as you won't be running any upscaling tech, but it will leave you with the sharpest and clearest looking game. Once you've dialed in your upscaling or sharpening method for your game, the only last thing left to do now is to potentially introduce G-Sync, FreeSync, or a manual FPS cap. You want to be utilizing at least one of these methods set up properly, because this will drastically reduce microstuttering you could be experiencing, alongside reducing some of the excess load off of the CPU and GPU, leading to lower temperatures, lower power draw, and a much more stable and consistent experience. Setting up G-Sync or FreeSync is super simple and easy to do. For the very basics of this, you need to make sure that the technology is enabled on your monitor. Head inside of the NVIDIA control panel or AMD control panel, enable FreeSync or G-Sync depending on what's available to you on your GPU. In the NVIDIA or AMD control panels, you need to navigate over to wait for vertical refresh and set this to on. You then need to turn V-Sync off inside of any game you want to utilize G-Sync on. Inside of the in-game settings, for those of you on NVIDIA GPUs, you need to enable NVIDIA Reflex, which will automatically cap your FPS about 10 lower than your monitor's maximum refresh rate, ensuring that you're always operating with inside of the G-Sync window. For those of you on AMD Radeon GPUs, as you don't have access to NVIDIA Reflex, you need to manually set an FPS cap by going to the settings menu, graphics, going to display, scrolling down to custom frame rate limit, changing this over to custom, show more, and the gameplay custom frame limit needs to be set to roughly 5 to 10 FPS lower than your monitor's maximum refresh rate. You're then successfully running on G-Sync or FreeSync depending on what's available to you, getting a super silky smooth experience. If it sounds too complicated or you don't feel like it's working properly on your system, make sure to check out the G-Sync Ultimate Guide linked in the description down below for all systems, as AMD users can also copy a lot of those settings. For those of you that aren't planning on utilizing variable refresh rates such as G-Sync or FreeSync, you should at least be looking to cap your FPS at something your system is able to achieve about 98 to 99% of the time. If you're able to play Warzone at anywhere from 150 to 220 FPS, you should be looking to cap your FPS at 140 to 150, because your system is always able to get get that FPS. If you cap your FPS at a value you can hardly reach most of the time, it's going to completely invalidate the gains you're going to get from capping your FPS. Even though you're losing some of that high-end FPS, you could potentially be lowering input latency because you're removing a lot of the excess rendering stress from the GPU, leading to lower input latency and more responsiveness in your game. Let me know of your results in that comment section down below, alongside any other tips or tricks you'd like to share, as it's always fantastic to get a discussion going on. And if you're looking for further optimization content to potentially even increase FPS further, or looking for FPS guides for other popular titles, make sure to check out the playlist section in the description down below. Or if you're not entirely sure where to go next, check out one of the 2 videos on screen now, and I'll see you guys over there.